What is up, YouTube? My name is Zane Jackson. I am 27 years old. I graduated from Sacramento State University. I currently work as an assistant electrical engineer for a city. The reason I want to make this video is because there's not enough normal videos out there covering the experience of the professional engineering exam, the CBT version. I tested in July of 2023 for electrical engineering power at a testing center. So I figured I'd give a non-biased review of what the test was like, what my study strategies were, and advice I'd give to other students. I am not trying to sell you anything, and I know there's not a lot of videos out there with engineers that are actually giving their experience with the computer-based exam. So with that being said, I have a couple notes in my phone I'd like to kind of cover. I thought about this video for a while, but here it is. My recommendations on the exam. Let's start there. Most resources you're going to find will give arbitrary number of hours you should study. Study this many hours a week, this many hours a month. You need 6 months, you need 8 months, you need 4 months, whatever you need, whatever they claim you need. From my personal experience, all of the claims that I could find online were wrong. You don't need as much time as they claim. With that being said, though, I am also someone who, when I study very focused. I don't claim that I study 10 hours and then scroll on my phone for half that time. I study and I put my phone aside and focus. The way I studied for the exam was I took 4 months. I worked on the exam prep material 3 or 4 days a week for about 90 minutes a day. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, I would take mock exams. Took the NCEES practice exam. I took Zach Stone's electrical engineering course, which I highly review, but I'll touch on that later. So essentially taking practice exams in the format that you would test. So you have your PDF of the NEC open, you have your test exam open, you set a timer, and you focus. Doing that, I think, is going to help the most. Biggest tips I can give as far as test strategies are understanding what the question is actually asking you. So when you take the test, it's a lot of red herrings. You're going to get a question that gives you 6 variables to keep track of, and as you're reading through, you're making mental note of each variable, frequency, voltage, horsepower, X, Y, and Z. By the end of the question, you'll find out that about 80% of the questions are just complete bullshit. You don't need the information, and they're trying to see if you don't, or if you know whether or not you need that information. So my big thing is get good at reading the questions, read the practice exam question, and then read it again and know what they're trying to ask you. Read through the rubric of the way the test is structured and understand which section they're actually quizzing you on. Again, mine was computer-based, so when I was in the testing center at about question 12, the test crashed. The computer crashed. I needed the testing center staff to come in and turn the computer back on. If this happens to you, don't get too worried. It does save your position in the exam, so that's good. I'll say this: when you're studying and you have maybe your computer your computer PE reference document up, and you're control F'ing through that document, right, to take your test. When you control F through the document on the actual exam, it's nowhere near as good. It slows down the computer a lot. You're using a regular monitor with the test and your NEC or your other code section on the other half of the sheet. So you can't have either open at a time. So you're always going to be working off half a monitor, which I didn't hear anyone mention in any other videos that I saw. So when you do that, you'll have essentially a tab with 7 other tabs on it, and on those tabs it'll be all the other code books you're allowed to use. That's what crashed the computer, is control F'ing through the code book. So even the computer didn't want to read the NEC, so don't worry if you feel the same way. I will say that of the topics on the test, the ones that gave me the hardest run for my money were protection, specifically surge protection devices, and small scale electronics. I'm more of a facilities distribution engineer, small scale design, and backup power systems. So I'm not fit for maybe small scale electrical, and I don't know a whole lot about transmission lines. So there was a good amount of transmission and a good amount of protection. I will say that you need to know how to read the NEC code. there's a lot of questions on code, and the code could single-handedly cause you to fail the test, or it could single-handedly save you. In my case, I believe the code saved me. I work with the code a lot, and I felt all the code questions were hard, but I have seen a lot of the tables before that they were asking about. So knowing that it existed, I knew that I needed to keep digging and find the correct area of the code book if I couldn't find it initially. So for the sake of this video, I'll try to be quick. The total breadth of knowledge required to take a foreign problem and generate an accurate answer using its relationship with other topics you know. So that is the hardest part of the test. You can take thousands of practice problems and they will not be the same test as the problems on the test. So when you go to take the test, you need to rely on understanding how each of the topics relate to each other and what are they actually trying to test you on. I will say this, a lot of the problems aren't super complex. They're not like super long math problems. You'll have 1 or 2 steps or 3 steps tops. And so that kind of throws you off, because when you're taking, practice exams problems, your induction machines, your motors and generators, your synchronous machines, those are big problems. And when you do them, you're like, wow, this is a lot of steps. You could eat up a whole sheet of paper. It's not that way on the actual test. So with that being said, you might second guess yourself. So that means you need to be confident of what they're actually asking you and understand the relationships. So that's one big thing. I'll say, kind of understand how each of the sections relates to each other. You need to be able to rely on yourself and the reference handbook, which I think comes with taking practice exams. Studying doesn't do it. You need to actually take practice exams timed. Maybe take 40 questions in 4 hours on every Saturday for 2 months leading up to the test. So that way you're used to it. I've heard a lot of people talk about stamina is the big problem. My stamina, I couldn't focus on the second half of the exam. I didn't think that was a problem at all. If you're someone who's high frequency mentally and you're a gamer or you have a hard job where you're actually thinking a lot, focusing for 8 hours is no different than a normal workday, which is a really weird anecdotal piece I got from all the review guides out there. It's like, it's a stamina game. It's like, if you have a hard job and you do stuff with your mind in your off time, the stamina is not an issue. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take practice exams full length to see how you're doing. You should do that, and I took 4. So I took a total of 4 practice exams at full length, 8-hour window of time. They all took me 6 hours, but my actual test took me 8 hours. And on my practice exams, I was getting 68%, 72, 76, 82 on my final practice exam. On the actual test, like I said, it took me the full 8. And the reason for that, I think, is entirely to blame on the code book being hard to read through. Their code book is not PDF, and it's not like upcodes where you can just go to a section and break down. You have to you have a PDF of the whole code book, and you got to scroll through it, and if you control F, it doesn't work how you would expect it to work with Adobe PDF, or Adobe Acrobat rather. So with that being said, yeah, know your code book, be comfortable answering those kinds of questions. Be confident when you get a code question, because those are the ones that you're like, I can find a legitimate answer for that. There's a little bit of interpretation, obviously, but the code spells it out for you. So you need to be able to find the section that addresses what you're being asked. The big tips would be consistency and discipline. You do have to cut off a lot of fun time, sacrifice. Maybe if you're a gamer, stop gaming. If you go to a gym, maybe cut the gym and just do body weight stuff for a couple months, but you will need to sacrifice. That is an absolute requirement. You will not pass without it. You need to sacrifice. You need to sleep good. You need to do things to protect your brain. I am not someone that thinks studying long hours is effective. If I can only focus for 75 minutes and I go and study 3 hours a night, study 30 hours a week, as some of these people would claim, and tell you to do, I think it's a huge fucking waste of time. You're not going to take the test like that. You're going to take the test focused and prepared the same way that you should be taking your practice exams. Practice exams on Saturday in the morning. Maybe you wake up, drink, eat, get ready to go. Take your practice exams like it's your actual test, and study like every time you study, it's your actual test. I'm focused, I'm locked in. Outside of that time, if you can't focus, all you're going to do is ruin your own confidence. So if you work, say you're exhausted, you worked an 8-hour shift and you studied for 90 minutes, and at about 2 hours you can't focus any longer, but you want to keep doing problems, and you do another 12 problems and you get 40% of them correct because you're exhausted. it carries over to the next day. You want to build up confidence, and if you're doing that and you're over studying and getting a lot of wrong answers, you're going to actually cause yourself to second guess yourself, when in reality you're only missing the problem because you're exhausted. So I would say study within your focus range, and obviously push it on weekends with the practice exams, but during the week don't ruin your mentality by over studying and getting wrong answers and then starting to think, well, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing, this is going to suck, I'm going to fail this test. No, you need to back up and say, okay, this is what I'm going to attack tomorrow. When I have a clear head, I'm going to go back to this topic and focus on this topic for that day. So, feel free to ask any questions in the comments. I'm going to try to keep this video short or shorter, so it's coming to its end here. I wanted to touch on kind of what it means to me, what the test meant to me. First of all, it's going to yield a big raise in my company. Since I work public sector, you need justification for a raise. So having your PE license is big, being able to stamp plans is big. But what it meant to me, I like to think of Iron Man. I'm not Iron Man, but yet, if I traveled back a couple hundred years and I had a strong magnet in my hand, I can make everyone believe I, could do magic. So in the sense of that, it's very special. Obviously money, there's a lot of pride involved. I know a lot of engineers that came from engineering families, but if you didn't, like me, and you kind of are a first generation engineer, in that sense, it's a lot of pride. It's like equivalent to putting on the main mantle of your career field, and then there's the old school, hierarchy of income ranges where, when you get your license, you kind of feel like you've essentially stepped up into the next class range. Your income now is no longer tethered to the fact you don't have your license. So getting your license opens up a lot of doors. It opens up a lot of recruitment, especially on LinkedIn and places like that. People will reach out to you. And I do have a question for the audience. What personality traits make an electrical engineer different from other disciplines? I've worked with multiple electrical engineers and multiple mechanical and civil engineers. It seems like each of the disciplines has a little bit of a personality trait tied to them. And I think electrical people don't like being overly criticized. So we all went into a field that no one knows what the hell we're doing, right? We're all electrical engineers, but the only people that can actually review your work are other electrical engineers, in essence. And I think that's what makes our field very special, is we don't get controlling bodies telling us what we can and can't do and reviewing our work and telling us to do it this way, because they don't know what we're doing. Only other electrical engineers will know what we're doing, which is really cool. With that being said, if you have any other questions about the exam, I don't want to talk about specific problems because I know it breaks, the NCEES's board of ethics or whatever. So if you have any questions about the exam itself, feel free to shoot me a comment on this video and let me know what you think. But again, I'll leave it at this. Zach Stone's PE review course is extremely fucking good. If you graduated school 2 or 3 years ago and you've been working since, and you've forgotten maybe some of your, some of the topics, whether it be, for me it was, I don't do a lot of math involving induction machines and synchronous motors. So, because I'm a distribution engineer and I don't, I spec out generators, but I don't do the math on how they're actually putting out the voltage, the terminals. So things like that, getting a course that helps you structure your studying and takes away having to produce that framework of strategy yourself and follow somebody else's proven method of how you should study, how you should break down the sections. Zach Stone's course is just 100% worth the cost. I know I said this isn't, I'm not trying to sell anyone here, but I will say that I think that his course directly affected me passing the exam, because it covered topics that school never covered. School never covered transmission. School never covered protective devices. School never covered NEC. So, and my school hardly covered motors. So when you think about those items, I mean, that's like half the test. And if your job doesn't work in code, or your job doesn't work in transmission, or your job doesn't work in, power systems, and you're an electrical engineer, these are things that you need to pass the exam. And Zach Stone's course has broken it down very, very well. It's arguably better than a lot of my college teachers. So with that being said, $1,200, I bought his 6-month unlimited package, used 4 months of it, passed the test. I did about 75% of the work on his course. But yeah, I'd recommend that, unless you have, a ton of really good notes from college and your engineer job covers everything that's on the test itself. So That's my suggestion. For me, it took the thinking out of strategizing. I just show up to the classes, do all the recommended work, and then take practice exams on my own and talk to other engineers about what they recommend. But that's how I would do it. I probably spent between 15 and 20 hours a week on average for 4 months straight, and I took 4 full-length practice exams. That was my strategy. Feel free to ask me questions if you have any about the computer-based test. All right, thank you.